Now, if I were paranoid, it just seems like everything that's been happening in not just the last couple of years, but literally the last sort of 10, 15 years. A lot of people would argue decades, and a few people would argue a couple of 100 years, but I'm just going to stick to the last sort of 10 years or so. What seems to have been happening is that one thing after another, things that have cropped up for us in the world have resulted in more and more polarization. So what do I mean by that? Well, when you look at some of the sort of major events of the world over the last 10 years or so, many of these things have resulted in, people, not just in one country here or there, but people across the globe, especially in the sort of major developed countries, the people in those countries have become more and more polarized to the point where families aren't talking to each other anymore, neighbours aren't talking to each other anymore, friendships are breaking up. Now, obviously, that isn't happening on every street corner, in every block, in every building around the world. I don't want to exaggerate this beyond all proportion. I am saying that generally across the board, there's been a lot more polarization, and it seems that people are holding such strong views about certain things that, it's not just a case of they won't agree to disagree. It's more the case that they will hate those who disagree. And so along with the polarization, there's also been an increase in hate. Now, I'm not talking about hate crimes. I'm not talking about any of that in particular at the moment. I'm just talking about general hate between different political divides, between different perspectives, between one point of view and another. Those who hold one view hate those who hold the opposite view. And so there's a couple of examples of this that I'll sort of glance over just to give them, an impression of what it is I'm talking about. So the first one, the first one is, well, all of these are obvious, but the first one is very obvious to mention: the Trump presidency. So here I am in Scotland, and the Trump presidency didn't necessarily have to mean a great deal to me. But here I sit in a country that is still divided over it to some extent. It might not be as bad in the UK as it is in the United States in many respects, but there is still a lot of polarization, and there's still a lot of different points of view, and people not talking to each other because they have a different point of view from each other. You're either all with Trump or you hate him. So it just so happens that I'm in Aberdeen in Scotland, and of course Trump spent some time here. Didn't he? He has investments in Scotland. He has a golf course not far from where I'm sitting here, talking to you guys. And I can remember seeing his helicopter flying overhead now and again when I was walking along the beach. Now, I'm not going to say how I responded to the sight of his helicopter flying overhead. It wasn't always very friendly, but that's, again, that's because I'm not perfect either, and I'm asking things of you that have also been a struggle for me. People hating on each other, literally people hating on each other. When the Coronavirus Act first started becoming enforced, if you like, and shops were enforcing social distancing and mask wearing and things like that, and you had marshals wandering around correcting people and and all sorts of arguments in the streets and videos on YouTube and all sorts of craziness going on over the course of the lockdown measures in this country and around the world. And there's been all sorts of protests that have never been mentioned much on mainstream media, just because mainstream media, of course, followed a particular official narrative and just didn't show anything that didn't fit the narrative. So I'm not going to go further into that. Again, you can always go to my website and look at the information I've posted there about my feelings and all that. But again, this is another example of polarization around the world, in this country and abroad, where people have had such strong views that they've disagreed so strongly that they have disowned each other. Friendships have been lost. Family members have disowned each other. Marriages have practically broken down or completely broken down, with one spouse vaccinated, one spouse not. And it's gone really crazy. And still now, even though most of the measures have been relaxed at this point, there's still a lot of discussion, there's still a lot of polarity, and still a lot of disagreement. And still it goes on. Whatever's happened in the last 100 years or 200 years, and a lot of people want to say that this situation dates back many, many decades, and it's all part of a big plan and things like that. And there's all sorts of conspiracy theories, some of which will have basis in truth and some of which will be rubbish. And it doesn't matter what I think or what you think about that either. What does matter is that we reduce the amount of hate and venom revolving around the dialogue on these things. We need to stop the hate, and apart from anything else, that's the absolute thing that we need to do. But let's have a look at what's possibly caused some of these issues. So if I just have a look here, I mean, I've got a couple of little notes here. Who influences it? So who influences polarization generally? We've got politicians, mainstream media, deep state / civil service, these kind of groups, pressure groups, activists for one perspective or the other. All these kind of influences that exist in our sphere of influence all have an effect on what we believe, what we feel, what feeds it. Political narratives, propaganda. I can't get away from mainstream media. Groupthink, group mindset, that kind of thing as well. I think polarization, group mindset, groupthink has had a massive effect on polarization. Something that, very often we wouldn't necessarily, say out loud for everyone to hear. When we're thinking it ourselves, or even if we're not thinking it ourselves, if we just have a general perspective on something, but we don't necessarily feel too strongly about it. But then a few other people talk about it, and then we talk to them about it, and a few other people join in, and we join in with them. And before you know where you are, you have this massive groupthink issue where the whole narrative has gone just completely out of proportion. And one thing follows the other, and before you know where you are, we're in a situation we're in now. We'll have to think about what actually, contributes to that, what's actually influencing it. And here we are as well, apart from anything else, with the ad hominem attacks online and Facebook groups, social media on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, anywhere you like. Ad hominem attacks. If you happen to be attacking from one side to the other, it's okay, but from the other way around, it's not okay. So if you happen to follow the mindset and groupthink of the particular social network, and you're not contravening their opinion police, then you can say anything you like. But if you contravene their opinion police, then they'll have the fact checkers after you, and suddenly you're not allowed a point of view. And so really it's that, isn't it? And the influences around it. The level of propaganda, I think, is the thing that I want to talk about mainly, because that has been the thing that has fed into all of this, more or less, all of the bile, all of the vile hatred, all of the belching from the bowls of of hell that has been spewing forth for the last 10 years on one topic or another, whether it's Trump, whether it's Brexit, whether it's COVID, whether it's Scottish independence. All of it comes from a from the the propaganda that's directed at us all from those with the means and the will to do it. Some of it's subtle, some of it not. And for responsibility for that, you have to look at that place that's commonly called the deep state, influenced by politicians, propagated by mainstream media. In order for the hate to stop, in order for the polarization to stop, we basically just need to stop falling for the propaganda perpetrated by those with the means and the will. Whether it's politicians, whether it's a pressure group, whether it's activists on YouTube channels, whether it's deep state bad actors, such as the Behavioural Insights team and others, whoever it is, wherever it's coming from, it doesn't matter. It's coming from all sorts of different directions. There's all sorts of different very unhealthy influences affecting us at this time, and has been for the last 10 years or so. So we need to take a step back from listening to all these people. And that includes me, of course. You could think that I'm talking a load of rubbish, and that's perfectly fine. But if you've reached this far into this podcast, then hopefully you're getting a gist of where I'm coming from, and hopefully you understand that what I'm not trying to do is tell you what to think or how to feel. I'm not doing that. All these other people, the propagandists, the Behavioural Insights team, the governments, the Scottish government, the UK government, the US government, the Australian government, the Canadian government, look no further than basically the original Five Eyes group, and you'll find out you'll see the main perpetrators of all this is the deep state and the governments of the countries that make up the Five Eyes arrangement. Therein lies the full responsibility for what's happened with COVID around the world. Therein lies full responsibility for the measures that have been implemented and the craziness that we've tolerated for 2 years. Therein lies responsibility for the information that we've been fed for the last 10 years over everything from the Brexit vote to the Trump presidency. This is what we're fighting. We're not fighting one opinion or another. Or we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be fighting the person who disagrees with us. We should be fighting the propaganda. We should be telling them all to bog off. We should not be listening to them.